Y'all want to see what happens when you take Tylenol while pregnant? Well, you get Cuba Gooding Jr. in radio. In South Carolina in 1976, a restarted man is pushing a cart with a radio in it while a train honks at him to get out the way. Eventually, he gets on it and uses it like a boat, proving he's not that dumb. Many white Mayo people in town rush to get away from him as if his condition is contagious. Then he reaches a football field to watch big backers practice. Harold Jones is the dedicated coach of the Hannah High School football team. He's very hands-on during their training because he wants the team to win all the games. Because it's football season, Coach Jones's wife, Linda, knows how busy he's going to be and realizes she won't be able to get Bick down. One day, a football gets kicked so hard it goes over the fence. The young man picks it up and takes it. A player, Johnny Clay, tells Coach Jones about it, but gets ignored. The next day, Coach Jones and Coach Honeycutt notice that the boys are busy with something. They catch them throwing balls at a shed. When Coach Jones opens the door, he sees a young man with his hands and feet taped together. He immediately frees the frightened man, and the man immediately runs out as fast as he can. "Run, Forrest!" Pissed, Coach Jones tells the team training the next day will take longer. At home, he continues to be bothered by the thoughts of the young man in the shed. Linda keeps talking about how their daughter, Mary Helen, is now a cheerleader. But Coach Jones is too into his thoughts to care. All he knows is that the varsity players have to be dealt with. Principal Daniels has learned about what happened and discusses with Coach Jones what their next plan is. She explains that the young man has always been rolling around, not bothering anyone, and she wants it to stay that way. So when Coach Jones sees the man again, with his radio in his buggy, he apologizes to him for what happened. Then the coach invites the man to come over at football practice, and he'll find him something to do. That day, Coach Jones makes the 9 varsity players, including Johnny Clay, run until it gets dark. My big back could never. Because Coach Jones is always busy, Linda reminds him that Mary Helen is already a junior. She'll leave home once she graduates, so Linda wants the coach to spend time with their daughter before she goes to Seattle to become a doctor. For the first game of the season, the Hannah Yellow Jackets win the game with Johnny Clay as the lead. As tradition goes, Coach Jones and Honeycutt head to the barbershop afterward to talk to the other men about the game. Frank Clay, a banker and also Johnny's father, is there. The men are worried because the team will soon face the Easley boys, but they trust that Coach Jones will lead Hannah to victory. One day, the young man comes by while the team is training, and Coach Jones asks Honeycutt to offer him some water. Then they invite him inside for a burger. Damn, that's some fugly teeth.
Hey y'all, unfortunately YouTube suspended my channel until January, so I'll be posting more on TikTok. Link in description.
The man doesn't talk at all, but he's fascinated with the radio in the office. Honeycutt sees it and gives the radio to him, and that's when he mentions the word radio. So the coaches decide to call him Radio from then on. After that, Coach Jones drives the young man home. Radio's mother is there, but they don't have time to talk. But later she asks Radio about the coach, and Radio says that Coach Jones is a nice man. The next day, the team is surprised when it is announced that Radio will help around during training. Though it has its difficulties, Radio does his best to help train the team. Unfortunately, the Hannah Yellow Jackets lose 3 games straight. Radio has become a familiar face, and even the crowd starts to recognize and love him. After winning 1 game, Coach Jones heads to the barbershop and realizes that even Frank has started to notice Radio, but does so in a negative way. This white boy better watch his back. One day, Coach Jones asks Maggie, Radio's mother, if they can take Radio in the bus tomorrow for a football game. Maggie gives permission. She used to worry about where Radio is because she's always at the hospital working, but now she's content to know that he's safe. She admits that the doctors can't give a name for Radio's sickness. She reveals that Radio's real name is James Robert Kennedy. They just say he's normal, only slower than most. Apparently, Maggie has an older boy named Walter who doesn't have a disability but died. When Coach Jones asks Principal Daniels for permission, she refuses to let Radio get on the bus with the students. She's worried not only because Radio might have a seizure, but also because he might be used as a mascot in games. She says it's giving Sandra Bullock in Blindside. Coach Jones gets offended, saying he's never going to do that to Radio, but he has decided not to let him come. Radio gets sad when Coach Jones says he's not joining them, and he even gets sadder that Hannah lost the game again. Still, Coach Jones hopes they'll win the last game of the season. Unfortunately for them, Radio gets too excited and reveals the gameplay. The opposing team hears it and manages to score against Hannah. In the middle of the game, Coach Jones argues with the referee, and he gets a penalty for it. Radio sides with the coach. and gets an additional penalty for the team. But they manage to beat all odds, and Hannah wins the game. Then Coach Jones hands the game ball to Radio for his support of the team all season. Johnny can't help but feel jealous. Later at the barbershop, Frank voices his concern. He thinks there is a distraction in the team. They used to win all games before, but now they lost half of their games. I just know Frank is unemployed. Worried about Radio now that the football season is over, Coach Jones asks Honeycutt to get Radio to help the basketball team. Radio is so devastated that the season is over, and his mom tries to cheer him up about all the things he's accomplished. Soon, Radio is at the high school, spending time in classrooms with the students. Principal Daniels knows about this, and she tells Coach Jones to keep Radio with him all the time. But the school board has heard about it, and so they send Mr. Tucker to investigate the matter. Mr. Tucker insists.
But the fact of the matter is, none of us has any experience with having a severely retarded man wandering the same halls as our students.
Even though there are some who don't want Radio in the school, Coach Jones is very happy to know that he's doing well with the basketball team. Radio spends Christmas Day with the Joneses, and they all head to town for the lighting of the Christmas tree. A lot of people give Radio gifts, and they are all handed to the coach first. Coach Jones is very pleased that a lot of people are showing love to Radio. But even though Mary Helen is happy for Radio, she can't help but feel like her own father doesn't have time for her. Maggie is so happy to see how loved Radio is. Then Coach Jones hands Radio the gift from his family. It's a radio. He immediately turns it on and asks his mother to dance with him. Later, Maggie asks Coach Jones why he's doing what he's doing, and all the coach says is that he thinks it's the right thing to do. When he returns home, Mary Helen is already asleep. On the next day, Radio goes around the neighborhood, leaving some of the gifts he received on other people's front porches. A police car pulls over, and Officer Newdahl asks Radio where he got all those items. Because Radio can't answer well, the officer thinks he's an Amazon package thief, so he arrests Radio and takes him to the station. When the older cops recognize Radio, they immediately release him and even have a sandwich with him. They ask Coach Jones to pick up Radio, and they introduce to him the new officer in town, Officer Newdahl. To make up for the mistake, Newdahl helps Radio distribute the rest of his gifts. During the basketball games, Johnny leads the team, and Radio is always beside Big Back Honeycutt. He's even making the morning announcements in school, and Alfre Woodard is so over it. One day, Johnny tells Radio that another teacher needs his help over at the girls' locker room. Radio refuses to go, so Johnny says the girls are not in the room, and only the teacher is there waiting for him. Radio heads to the locker room, and he's terrified when he walks in on the girls changing their clothes. He immediately runs out, embarrassed. Coach Jones talks to him to find out the truth, but Radio refuses to say who made him enter the girls' locker room. So Coach Jones asks around to know what happened. Then he confronts Johnny and tells him he's not going to be participating in the basketball game the next day. Principal Daniels approaches and halts the confrontation. When Johnny complains, the principal says Coach Jones has the authority to stop Johnny from playing because he is the school's athletic director. Principal Daniels tells him he can be a cheerleader. Then Coach Jones adds that it wasn't Radio who ratted Johnny out, but that other people did. Coach Jones promises to Principal Daniels that nothing like that will ever happen again. When Coach Jones returns home, Mary Helen reveals that Radio's mother had a heart attack and died. They rush over to Radio's house to check on him. Radio is so devastated that he trashed the entire house. Coach Jones comforts his friend, saying that his mother will always be in his heart even now that she's gone. On their way home, Coach Jones tells Mary Helen that when he was 12 and delivering papers on the same route, he heard someone whimpering in pain. He approached a house with barbed wire and chicken wire at the bottom and saw a boy, the same age, staring back at him. He knew the boy had a disability and that he was just trapped there, but he never did anything to help him. Now that Radio's mother is dead, the principal thinks their situation will be entirely different. Even Mr. Tucker from the school board is worried that no one is supervising Radio. He says he's been receiving reports about Radio barging into the girls' locker room. Coach Jones gets angry when Mr. Tucker takes out a list of care agencies that can take Radio in. Then he confronts Frank for reporting Radio. Still, Frank insists it's best to go back to how things were. Instead of giving up on Radio, Coach Jones starts to teach him how to write. When Johnny returns, he sees a letter from the Radio and a radio in front of his locker. He approaches Radio and thanks him for the gift. Then Radio apologizes to Johnny because he got scolded. Hannah's basketball team wins the game with Johnny leading them. Frank is so proud of his son and brags about him. However, he doesn't like that Johnny is getting close to Radio. So Johnny finally stands up to his father, saying that Radio's not the problem. It's Frank's halitosis that's the problem. Coach Jones finds out that parents requested to see Principal Daniels on a Sunday night. He wasn't asked to attend. For a moment, he tells Linda he should have gotten Radio the help he needed. But Linda reminds her husband that he helped Radio the best he could. The next day, Coach tells Radio he's probably going to join the 12th grade instead of the 11th grade in the upcoming school year. Everyone is shocked when Coach Jones walks into their secret meeting. Frank is still determined to get Radio out of Hannah. Then Coach Jones reminds everyone that Radio is doing well only because he's allowed to be in school. He says Radio changed everyone's lives by showing them how to treat people kindly. Then, the coach announces that he's quitting as the football team's coach. He is still going to teach. But from this point forward, he'll focus on his own family and will continue to look after Radio. 3 months later, Radio is participating in a graduation ceremony. Johnny gives him a jersey and thanks him. At the end of the graduation, Principal Daniels announces that Radio is an honorary graduate. He'll be returning as an 11th grade student next year. 26 years later, Radio, now in his 50s, is still leading the Yellow Jackets onto the field. Meanwhile, Coach Jones is inducted into the South Carolina Coaches Hall of Fame. He and Radio are still good friends. Unfortunately, Radio passed about 6 years ago. Truly a sad but inspirational story. What did you guys think of this one?
If you like this video, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because YouTube isn't recommending my videos. So, if you like to watch more foolishness, you can click here or here.